You have some experience on economic development. What are some areas that you also think would be important for people to know that are going to be a focus for you besides economic development?
Besides economic development, would jobs be part of economic development?
I think so.
Okay.
Job creation.
Job creation, economic development, what would be beyond those issues? I think national security is certainly a very, very important issue. The preamble of our Constitution says to provide the defense. And so that is something that every person that runs for U.S. Congress or is in a leadership role within our nation has to be very conscientious of, is where we at with our national security. And there's a broad front now that's occurring with national security. We're not just having issues here and there with certain other nations, but what would be considered rogue nations, and then also quasi-nations that really aren't nations, such as Al-Qaeda, where they just are a moving target. And so how do you deal with that? And so what we've developed is, how do you deal with that? You come up with things such as smart power. And that's something I worked with every day when I was in Iraq as a United States diplomat and embedded in the United States Army. I worked with smart power every day. So I'm familiar with some of the things that go with that and how it functions and how it works and some of the elements. So I think having an understanding of smart power, I've got the experience working with that. But then also there's a new front that's coming to the forefront, and that's the issue of our national security as it relates to the amount of debt that we have. We just crossed a milestone, Jason, in the last year that I'll bet many people, unfortunately, haven't heard about. They've heard something about, but the milestone is this, that 50% of the debt owned by the public in the United States debt that's held by the public, over 50% of that now is not held by United States citizens, it's held by foreign interests. So when we cross that milestone, questions should be asked, and all over America. Are we now at 99% sovereignty? Are we now at 95% sovereignty? Are we at 92% sovereignty? There's a lot of questions that should come out of that milestone as we look at the future of our nation and as we look at national security.
Another subject that has obviously been out there for quite a while now is healthcare reform.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any opinions on that?
Healthcare reform is something that needs to be addressed. I think most Americans would agree that we can't continue to have the overall cost of healthcare continue from, in the 60s it was 5% of our economy. Now it's 16.5% of our economy and growing. We can't afford to make $1,000 and then have 200 of that go right out the door for health care for our family. So we do need reform. But what does that reform look like? And that's the part where we start to divide as a nation of what that should look like. I do believe that one way or another we need to get some type of safety net in place. And the reason I think that a safety net in place for Medicare and our healthcare system and our national debt is because if Congress can't agree on a plan in the next year or two, we do need to have some safety net underneath so that we don't allow ourselves to end up in a financial crisis in this nation. We have to have some type of safety net, whatever that is. If there's a trigger point of 2 or 3 items, whether that's related to the debt held by the public, whether that's related to the cost of health care as related to our economy, whether that's related to the amount of time that we have until the Medicare trust fund is exhausted. Any of those 3 things are trigger points that throw up flags that say we're moving into a danger zone and we need to have some type of safety net that we've all agreed upon, that if we get close to that and two of those 3 flags come up and those bells and whistles go off, what do? We've got all kinds of emergency readiness programs all over the United States, but I don't know of anything that we have in place to protect ourselves from too much debt.
Relating to job creation,
okay,
and healthcare reform,
okay,
right now we have a lot of different energies going in different directions trying to resolve a lot of issues.
Yeah.
If you were to pick one thing to focus on at the moment, healthcare reform or job creation, which one do you think would be the priority right now?
Short-term job creation, no doubt about it. That has to be a focus, but right behind it is healthcare reform, because the gains that we make in creating more jobs can be negated with, to some degree in the economy, with the cost of healthcare. So if you look at what the macroeconomists have stated, they feel that we've got to be implementing a plan for healthcare reform and for decreasing the national debt by 2012. That we need to have agreed upon a plan and be implementing it by the year 2012. But in order to start decreasing some of those deficits and creating efficiencies within healthcare, we've got to first get the economy moving again. And so we've got a short window of about 19 months, really, to get the economy moving, get the jobs moving, and then turn right around and start decreasing the deficits of the nation.
Pertaining to other subjects that you're going to be potentially facing in Congress, where do you stand on education?
Well, education is a major issue because some of our global competitors, such as the Chinese, from what I understand, are graduating more honor students than we're graduating students. So education is so important because the one competitive advantage, and that's a macroeconomic term, is what is the competitive advantage? For Jason, it might be to run a newspaper shop, to be able to run a website design company, to be able to run a photography studio. Those are your competitive advantages. What are the competitive advantages for America? I think that our if not number one, but one of the top competitive advantages for the United States of America is innovation. That's what has brought us to the table where we're at now. When you look at the history of auto manufacturing, when you look at the history of aircraft manufacturing, space travel, innovation is what brought us to the table where we're at right now. So I think that that is something that we really have to focus on. What brings us to innovation is education. Education is the precursor, the thing that brings us to the table of innovation. So education is extremely important. Both my kids are in college, and I'm excited about that. We've got to figure out how to get more kids in college. But here's the part that I think a lot of people aren't focusing on. We can put together great programs for getting kids in college, but we've also got to face the idea that we've got a social structure that somehow is allowing the idea that a lot of kids are going to jail or, unfortunately, getting pregnant in their teenage years. So you can have all the great subsidy programs in the world for college, but if they're not even graduating from high school because of certain situations in their life that has led them in the direction of getting in trouble with the law or led them in the direction of becoming pregnant, then that's unfortunate, and we've got to be looking at that as well. And that means that we go all the way back to 7 to 10-year-olds. And that means that we provide the nurturing that we can to those children, whether that comes from a stable family or whether that comes from mentoring outside the family. That child between the ages of 7 and 10 years of age has to have the one-to-one nurturing that they need to emotionally develop, and then that allows for a foundation to academically succeed.
Okay.